Well, hello again from here at Newcastle United's training ground, and what a glorious day it is on Tyneside right now. And what isn't so glorious is the shortlist for Young Player of the Year. And how on earth is Anthony Gordon not on there? Not only would I have Anthony Gordon on the shortlist for Young Player, I probably have him on the shortlist for the main player of the season too. And if you're going to ask me who Newcastle's best player of the season has been, I committed to this in the video the other day, I would give it to Gordon. I called it at the start of the season. I saw something out there in America through watching him train, play and speaking to him that told me he was going to have the campaign just as it's played out. He's only missed 2 games all year. Those were both because of suspension. His goals and assists contributions now are both into double figures. He has been outstanding. He is rightly now involved in the England setup. He will go to the Euros. I think if he impresses during the early part of the training camp, he might even be pushing for a start at the Euros, especially if England do have a problem at left back. But no, to not be included on that young player shortlist. And you know, you can look at the others on there and you can make an argument from being ahead of several. I'll make an argument from even being ahead of Alexander Isak, in part because Isak turns 25 in a couple of months' time. But that aside, I would have Gordon as Newcastle's player of the season, even in front of Alexander Isak, as wonderful as he has been. And that is because of what I just touched on there, the durability, coming back week after week. When he did that interview with myself, just over my shoulder there actually, a few weeks ago, he said availability is the best ability, and wow, in this season of all seasons, how true that is. Alexander Isak has had a tremendous end, 21 goals in the league. We're not, I'm not going to put down Isak and say Anthony Gordon is so much better, but it's my own opinion that I think Gordon is worthy of inclusion ahead of Isak over the course of a whole season. Others on there, Destiny Udogie, Kobbie Mainoo. Come on, listen, I cover England. I think Kobbie Mainoo is a very good player and I think he should go to the Euros, but it's been a breakout campaign. It's been a campaign of, impact here and there when he's shown himself as an 18-year-old to be a very good player. Anthony Gordon, as a 22, 23-year-old, has shown himself to be a fantastic player over the course of a whole campaign, and that is why player of the season, keyword being season, that is why he should be on there. Not only that, he should be in the conversation to actually win the thing as well. So to not be on the shortlist, I'm absolutely amazed. And I asked Eddie Howe just now, how does he play every week? He said Anthony has got a unique mindset with regards to his body. He has got the attitude that he's never injured. He said to me during that interview, I don't know the physios, I don't want to know them. Eddie as well said something which I thought was interesting earlier. He said some players have got a different approach to that, whereby they need to be 100% to train or to play. Anthony Gordon doesn't. He tells himself he is 100% every day, but even if he's not, he will go again. He's got a want, a thirst, a hunger, a love to play. And that comes through not only in his continued selection, but also in what he does when he's actually on the pitch. And for me, I just think for £40 million, rising to the 45, I think he's been an absolute steal. I think he'll go on to be one of the best signings in the club's history. That's how much I think of him. Now, what else did he say when he met with us press this morning? A few quick fire questions, and I will keep the answers brief. These are questions which have been asked of me on social media this morning. Who plays in goal tomorrow? All of the information is pointing towards Martin Dubravka. Now, I know when people ask these questions, it is half the time thinking with a fantasy football head. Another question which lends itself to that is who will take the penalties tomorrow as well? Now, we saw the incident down at Burnley last week, didn't we, when Callum Wilson and Alexander Isak both wanted to take it. Now, it looked as if Wilson had said to Isak, and I think Isak's argument was, I'm going for top scorer in the Premier League. I think he was only 1 behind Erling Haaland at the time. Now, as it turns out, he's now 5 behind after Erling Haaland's 4 goals against Wolves. So I think we'll revert to Callum Wilson being the number 1, especially given Isak did miss last week. Other questions. Will Kieran Trippier be fit tomorrow? I reported a couple of weeks ago he was in Dubai doing some training out there, working with a physio. He's come back, he's okay, he's good, he's trained all week, he's trained well. I would expect to see him in the squad tomorrow. That was always the plan, but not necessarily starting. Given how well Tino Livramento has done in recent weeks, I think Trippier from the bench is perhaps what we'd expect to see. Fabian Schär, what's the story there? Eddie Howe said 7 days ago he was out for the season. Fabian Schär then put something out through the Swiss press saying he wasn't. My information back then was that Schär might be okay for Manchester United on Wednesday, and that looks like it will be the case, but he won't play tomorrow. Now, what else did Eddie say, and what else was he asked? Well, he was pretty bullish and he was pretty bold in the message he sent to the hierarchy, and anyone for that matter, including those press guys, as to the risks, the dangers of selling Alexander Isak and Bruno Guimaraes. He said it would set the club back a considerable distance if you sell your best players. And this was a topic I've explored a lot in recent videos, so I'm not going to go over old ground, but I set out, didn't I, 2 weeks ago trying to answer the question, would £100 million for Bruno Guimaraes make sense? And I started the video by saying, yeah, I think it would in an FFP world. Now, come the end, I'll almost talk myself into all the reasons why you just don't sell a player as special and as unique as Bruno as it is. Now, I spent a little bit of time in Paris this week and met with various people, and the information coming back to me, and this is something included in my NUFC notebook today, link in the description below, is that Paris Saint-Germain have no interest in Bruno Guimaraes at £100 million. And for me, a lot of the noise around him is perhaps artificially created listen, it never does a player any harm to be linked with clubs like Paris Saint-Germain and Manchester City, but the word in football circles is that no one is going to bite at the £100 million, and certainly PSG, it was said quite emphatically to me this week that that is just not a deal they're pursuing now. That'll be good news to Eddie Howe, and I do honestly think if you're pushing me now, will Bruno and Isak be Newcastle players at the start of next season, and perhaps more importantly on September the 1st? I would say yes, I really do believe that. Now, Eddie's point makes so much sense in that when he was offering justification for such a bold, strong statement, he said, when you do that, and you put a time frame on it, that means you've got to go out and buy players who are unproven, and it could take you 1-2 years, if not more, to then get them to the level of Isak, to the level of Bruno. And that, for me, when you're on the cusp of something, this isn't Newcastle, who the example given has been Aston Villa from a couple of years ago when they sold Jack Grealish. When Aston Villa sold Jack Grealish, they were a team who had just avoided relegation really, and the £100 million was used then to turn them into a top half of the table team. Listen, they've done very well. They've bought some very good players. They're going to qualify for the Champions League. Of course, it can work for you. We've seen the example at Liverpool as well, often quoted when they sold Coutinho. But Newcastle aren't a million miles away from me. And if you can keep Bruno, you can keep Isak, and then with smart recruitment this summer, allied to getting rid of this injury curse, the injury problems, and Eddie touched on that today, he feels now as if things are beginning to clear, and he's confident that come the summer, bar the longer term ones like Botman and Lascelles, he's going to have a full squad to pick from. That plus new signings, plus keeping those top players. Eddie was in really bullish, positive, optimistic mood, I thought, this morning, and clearly I've bought into it, not just because it's a lovely sunny day here in Gosforth and I'm headed to a beer garden. No, I go along with that, and I just think Newcastle are finishing the season in a good place, and the message Eddie sent this morning about those 2-star players, I think it was important, I think it was brave, I think it was strong, and I agree with it. Now, one other little quick update and a quick interlude on Eddie Howe. Not so steady Eddie, big cut on his hand, DIY incident at home. So yeah, Eddie's hung up his hammer for the season, and perhaps even for good, I think. So yeah, when you asked me the question earlier, who'll be going in goal this weekend, it definitely won't be Eddie Howe. Yeah, nasty gash there. Didn't actually realise he'd done it until his son asked what all the blood was. So Eddie, stick to where whistles, balls, bibs and cones. I don't think the hammer and nails is for you. Now, a question which has been asked of me a lot this week and all season really, and this is something you talk about amongst your friends, you speak about in the pub, with all of Newcastle's players available, what represents the best midfield three? Given Tonali's going to come back this summer, we hope Joe Willock will be free of his Achilles problem. Bruno is going to stay. Joe Linton's back to fitness. Elliot Anderson, Louis Miley, Sean Longstaff. There are so many options in there. Now, in theory, I think in theory, and this is something that went back to the start of the season, Newcastle's best midfield three would be, by terms of pedigree, I think, Tonali on the right, Bruno in the middle, and Joe Linton on the left. That would seem to have a little bit of everything. That was in theory. In practice at the start of the season, don't forget, that didn't play out. I was down at Brighton there when it definitely didn't work. And when I made the video last week, and there was a lot of reaction to this, which was good, that's okay. I spoke about Tonali and saying he had so much still to prove at Newcastle, and some people didn't really seem to get that and didn't agree with that. They thought he'd proven himself to be a wonderful player in the first 12 games of the season. I'm sorry, he didn't. He just didn't, One guy came back at me and said, well, you're not in Milan. Did you not see how good he was in Milan? Yeah, I was in Milan, and I was there with a colleague. My colleague was doing the match report. I had the luxury that night, which isn't often, of only watching one player and writing a piece all about Sandro Tonali. And he was poor. He was really poor. I don't want to turn this into Tonali bashing again. Goodness, I'm giving you guys material to come back at me with. But the point I make is that, yes, I think he will come back and be fantastic. I like him. I always use that phrase, I'm not going to go over old ground, and then run over old ground. But no, I like him. I think he'll come back. I think for all the reasons I've listed in terms of freeing himself of whatever burden it was, having the exposure now to Eddie Howe. If any coach in the world is going to turn you into a player and turn around what was, for me, a little bit of an iffy start, it was going to be Howe and his elite level coaching staff. So yes, he will come back so much better for all of those reasons. But in terms of going back to my question, what represents Newcastle's best midfield three? And I'd love to have your thoughts below the line on this, what you think would be the best bet going into next season. Well, I think there's two in there, straight away. I think Bruno Guimaraes and Joe Linton are the two. And then it's a plus one, would that be the running power of Joe Willock? What we saw last season after the first 4 games, Sean Longstaff came back in and immediately things picked up. He was the missing ingredient back then. Hasn't worked out from of late, I will say, in defence of Sean. He goes week on week, game on game, been playing with a little bit of a problem recently. And I do really hope that goal and that performance down at Burnley, down at Burnley does do him the world of good. Now, who else is in there? Elliot Anderson. What I think of him? I think he offers something. He's almost a bit of a hybrid. He's got that Joe Willock ability to carry the ball and transport possession. He's got the physicality of a Joe Linton, and he's got at times the skill of a Bruno Guimaraes. So I'm almost describing there the world's best midfield player. But Elliot Anderson, still a little bit to prove on a consistency level with regards form and fitness. But I like him so much. I would love to see him have a breakout season next year. But the point I was making there was, if it's not Tonali, if Tonali does need a little bit of time to get up to speed, would it perhaps be a Joe Willock in there alongside Bruno and alongside Joe Linton? That again, Joe just offers something totally different when he's at his best, and we haven't seen him nowhere near his best this season. He's had 2 good games, almost 2 bounce games when he first came back in after the injury, and then he reverted to a really vastly diminished version of himself. So that is why, as well, the information coming back to me is that Newcastle aren't really actively looking for a midfielder at the moment. That might change if the news on Willock isn't good or interest in Bruno is real and revived, So they are assessing options in there, but it's certainly not a priority. And that is because I've just spent 2 or 3 minutes trying to debate which 3 out of 6 or 7 players you would put in there. So yeah, answers below the line. Now, there is, of course, a game at home tomorrow at Brighton, and a very important one at that, given the fight for European places. And I would love to see Eddie stick with his channel his inner Mike Bassett, that variation of 4-4 flaming 2 we saw last week with Isak and Wilson through the middle. I think Brighton have got very little to play for. João Pedro, their star striker, almost looks as if he isn't going to play. And when Brighton were at St James's last year, it was suicide, really, playing out from the back, the manner in which they did. Newcastle, of all teams, had the ability to penalise that, to expose that flaw, what is a flaw for me, in their tactic. Now, go same again. Put Isak and Wilson in from the start. 3 o'clock, St James's, sunny day, last home game of the season. The atmosphere will be up, given the stakes, given the occasion, everything else around it. Big delegation from Saudi in town too. Yeah, if Newcastle start right, go for them from the off, and bear in mind they'll have options from the bench as well, Barnes and Joe Linton, Almiron and others. I think just go after them. I think tomorrow could be a really, really good day for Newcastle. Speaking of good days, guys, isn't this wonderful? Someone's turned off the wind machine. We've had sun now for 2.5 days. There's going to be hosepipe bans before we know it, but yeah, one tap which the locals haven't turned off around here is the beer tap, and that's where I'm headed now. So thank you so much for watching. Please hit like, comment and subscribe. My WhatsApp channel as well, put a link in the description below. There's loads of content that come in there over the course of the weekend. Please subscribe, it's free, it's great fun, voice notes, videos, pictures, all the rest of it. And thank you again, guys, for watching the past week. Some great feedback on the video out in Paris there, and the Sandro Tonali video last weekend, as controversial as that was to some of you. Okay, take care, have a lovely weekend. Bye bye.